All right, everyone, now it's time for sort of the big story of the day. I was going to cover like polling, but it's remaining stable. So brief update, Trump's approval is basically the same, a little above 43. Generic ballot has ticked down for the Democrats by 0.3 from 7.9 to 7.6. So again, it's moving slightly in the Republicans' favor, but they need to keep that gap to 5 points or less by midterm day. Otherwise, it could go wrong for the Republicans in the House. Senate's totally different story. We got to wait for the SCOTUS fallout. We're literally going to have to wait for like 10 to 15 days out from the midterms to get a proper prediction going. Literally, it's going to be that difficult because of the Anthony Kennedy dust-up. This is going to be really, really interesting. Well, we got to talk about Trump's visit to Europe. People were saying that he was going to fly over, defecate on everything, and fly back like a seagull. Apparently, that was one quote from one of these EU officials or someone in the US media. And it was really funny. And come on, sometimes insults of Trump can be hilarious. That particular line is funny. And I say this as someone who tacitly supports him because I'm looking at his platform, at what he's accomplished. I'm comparing it to, his opponents. He definitely comes out on top, at least 8 times out of 10, so I'm going to generally prefer him. I'm going to prefer Trump and Rand and people like that over Chuck Schumer, Maxine Waters. People want to punch me in the neck probably. But Trump chastised Germany. He actually brought up Russia, which was a little bit of 4D chess, I think. He's like, well, Germany is reliant upon Russia for most of its fuel. Now, this claim is half true. Trump has a tendency to do this because he knows that he'll get fact-checked and therefore what he said will actually be reported more widely. If Trump says something that is completely objectively true and not skewed at all, it's 100% on the mark, they're not going to want to report on it because they'll have to admit that he's right. So he says it a little bit wrong. Instead of saying that Germany gets between 20 and 30% of its natural gas from Russia, which is absolutely true, he said 20 to 30% of all of its energy, or rather, he said 60 to 70% of their energy, which is wrong. 60 to 70% of their natural gas does come from Russia. Now, let me ask this of people who are like never Trumpers. Does it seem good that a major NATO player, one of the main economies of Europe, one of the main military powers of the NATO alliance, although their own troops have problems, but they're a massive weapons exporter. I think they're number 3 in the world after the US and Russia. I think they're still ahead of China. Like, everyone wants a Leopard tank. You'd want one too, trust me. It's a match for anything else in the world. It's like the Armada tank is nothing compared to that. Think of it this way. At any given time, if Russia gets into a squabble with NATO, they can turn off roughly a quarter of all of Germany's energy needs. That is, they could cause massive brownouts across Germany. And by the way, their natural gas goes to other nations as well. I think Turkey has a gas deal with them now as well. I think. Which is funny because, Turkey shot down that Russian fighter and there was a big standoff and Russia's like, don't you fucking do that again. They wag their fingers and Erdogan goes over there, says, hugs Putin and says, oh no, I'm sorry, it was a misunderstanding. We kind of like you. Can we buy some of those tanks that you just made? Sounds pretty good. Now he's sort of leaning towards being a neutral party. It's actually funny to see Turkey be basically the pendulum upon which world politics has swung multiple times, mainly because of the Bosphorus, but, and the fact that they're, I believe, now a top 10 military. Yeah, you wouldn't believe how many tanks they have. It's actually unfathomable. Thousands of them. But Trump chastised Germany for this, and it's masterful because everyone's always talking about how Trump he loves Russia, he wants to help Russia, and yet he's coming out and saying basically, hey, Germany, stop buying Russia's natural gas. You know what would happen, by the way? It would probably cause another recession in Russia. It's a lot of fuel sales. Natural gas, again, about 20% of their energy, most of it's coming from Russia. If they were to turn off the spigot and start buying U.S. natural gas, it'd be great for us, be great for the cost as well. It'd be a little bit more expensive for Germany maybe, but it would definitely strengthen NATO's hand. When you are reliant upon another country, especially one that's not a full ally, for your fuel because you can't fuel yourself, don't you think that's a little problem? Now, they get U.S. coal. And they get German coal and coal from Eastern Europe as well. Germany, 40% of their energy comes from coal. Did you know this? It's funny because people talk about how environmentally friendly they are, and yet they use a hell of a lot more coal than we do. Most of ours, at this point, we're transferring to using our own oil and natural gas. We pump the oil out, refine it, use that. We use natural gas that we get as a fracking byproduct looking for that oil, and it's all great and it's relatively clean compared to, I guess, German electricity. Meanwhile, at the same time, I think 10% of their energy comes from wind. So it's like the tale of two Germanys. You've got the sort of East German brutalist industrialism, the diesel punk sort of side of Germany, the really brutal one, and then you have at the same time you have this, like hippie flower child solar panels and windmills and stuff. So some nuke plants as though they were clean. By the way, where does that uranium come from? It comes from Australia usually. They have to ship it. They have to dig it out of the ground using oil. So don't talk about how it's green and renewable and wonderful and the only way forward for the world, because it's really not. We're fucked if that were true, because we'll run out of that long before I think we run out of gas and oil. So it is true, in part, what Trump said. He simply substituted the word fuel for the word natural gas, thus getting people to actually report on something they probably wouldn't have touched otherwise. If he had said, hey, you get most of your natural gas from Putin, and you're sitting here chastising me as a Russian pawn, no, but it would have been such a good, coherent point. Nobody would have wanted to report on it. It would make Trump look sane. It would make it look like, hey, Trump is pointing out the obvious to people who don't know that this is actually a fact. And thus, shaming the EU, who claims to be like so independent, hyper-patriotic about the West, and Trump's like a Putin puppet, and he's the only one talking about this. They don't want that to happen. No, they wouldn't want to report on it at all, but he forced them to by making a mistake. He does this with spelling errors. It's like he's written books. I know his ghostwriter says he can't write a line. That's bullshit. Person knows it, but they can't be sued because he can't prove a negative. This happens all the time. People assume that Trump's like off his rocker or nuts. When he makes a mistake, sometimes it's not actually a mistake. It's branding. He's used to this with Stern and tabloids and wrestling and pageants and TV shows and stuff. He's done this for years. So he did fly over and defecate on the EU. Yeah, he absolutely did. He had several dust-ups with the Germans. He came out on top. Got this to be reported on. Now, look at how Germany looks. They're like, oh yeah, hard line against Putin. We're going to stop the evil Russians that are trying to control the U.S. too. Oh, but you're buying their fuel. You're helping prop up their economy. Well, why don't you get your gas from us? Why don't you strike a lucrative trade deal with the United States if you're so high and mighty on this issue? And it's very funny, and it's not going to happen, but it puts pressure on them. And I think he's hoping, by poking Germany a little, I think he's hoping to collapse Merkel's government, because it's already on the skids. She's got several people that have threatened to resign. They might have to have a snap election if I think the Bavarian foreign minister does. Merkel probably doesn't get voted back in. Who goes next? I think polling showed, isn't AFD almost at 20% now? Historically very, very high, like 5 points up from the highest it's ever been or some insane number. So a fifth of the German population is fed up. And a lot of them are also turning to far leftism. Again, exactly what I described would happen within not just Germany, but other EU states as well. As social alienation inclines, the center sort of has problems. It is inevitable. The centrists suffer. People who are center, center-left, center-right, establishmentarians, the typical lords of Europe, they're the ones who are seen as corrupt, inept, and can't do anything. They get fucked. They have to form all sorts of weird coalitions that then don't work because of minor disagreements and lead to a further snowball effect. That's what happens. This is why AFD does better, Le Pen did better, Wilders people, everyone, far left, far right, libertarian uprising movements, green parties. Stuff like that those are going to continue to grow within the consensus of Europe, destroying the old consensus and making one that's simply change for change's sake, I think, more than anything else. It's not like unidirectional. It's not like they're all going to go far left and you'll have a commie Europe, or far right and you'll have like Nazis and populists. That's not going to happen. You're going to have a patchwork Europe, and it's also going to be a pendulum Europe. These groups, some of them will fail and then they'll get supplanted by the other fringe. Occasionally you'll get a centrist uprising as well, maybe classical liberals or something. That's about all. Peace out.